It's not whether you're right or wrong that's important. It's how much money you make when you're right. That was the philosophy of George Soros, the man who made $1 billion in a single day by betting against the British pound. You see, Soros's trade has impacted how we understand currency markets, government policy, and the limits of central bank power, things that still shape global finance today. Soros was so successful that September 16, 1992, became known as Black Wednesday, the day one hedge fund manager forced Britain to abandon its currency policy and cost the government $3.4 billion. Now, many of you already know that Soros is a controversial billionaire investor. However, there is a good chance you're re-underestimating just how audacious his bet was and how thoroughly he humiliated one of the world's most powerful governments. I mean, Soros himself said, "I'm only rich because I know when I'm wrong." But on Black Wednesday, he was spectacularly right. From spotting Britain's economic weakness to executing the largest currency trade in history, George Soros is undeniably one of the most legendary speculators ever. And this is the story of how one man broke the Bank of England. Now, our story begins with George Soros, a man who understood markets better than the people running them. Born in 1930 in Budapest, Hungary, Soros survived the Holocaust, using forged documents. This taught him a crucial lesson. Systems that appear stable can collapse overnight. After fleeing communist Hungary, Soros arrived in London in 1947 with nothing, studied at the London School of Economics, then moved to New York in 1956. In 1970, he founded the Quantum Fund with a simple strategy: identify unstable government policies, bet massive amounts they'll fail, and profit when reality forces change. By the early 1990s, this made him a billionaire, but his greatest trade was still ahead. Now, in this currency world, the setup began in 1979 when Europe created the Exchange Rate Mechanism, or ERM. Countries agreed to keep their exchange rates within narrow bands. If a currency weakened, its central bank would intervene by buying it. Britain joined the ERM in October 1990 at 2.95 German marks to £1. But there was a fatal problem. The pound was overvalued. By 1992, the mismatch was obvious. Germany had reunified and was raising interest rates aggressively to fight inflation, strengthening the German mark. Britain was in recession, desperately needing lower rates to stimulate growth. But lowering rates would weaken the pound, forcing Britain out of the ERM. Britain was trapped. Suffer recession or admit failure. The government chose denial, vowing to defend the pound at any cost. George Soros saw opportunity. In mid-1992, Soros analyzed Britain's position. The math was brutal. Britain's economy couldn't sustain high interest rates. The pound was overvalued, and Britain's $44 billion in reserves weren't enough to defend against sustained attack. Soros concluded Britain would eventually be forced to devalue or exit, and he decided to force the issue. In August and September 1992, Soros began shorting the pound. He borrowed billions of pounds from banks, immediately selling them for German marks. If the pound fell, he'd buy it back cheaper and pocket the difference. By early September, Soros had shorted approximately £10 billion, about $15 billion. His partner, Stan Druckenmiller, convinced him to go even bigger. By mid-September, Quantum Fund and allied speculators had short positions totaling tens of billions. The British government fought back desperately. Throughout September, the Bank of England bought pounds with billions in reserves, trying to prop up the exchange rate. Chancellor Norman Lamont publicly declared Britain would never devalue. Prime Minister John Major called the ERM membership central to our economic policy. But the market didn't believe them. Every day, speculators sold more pounds. Every day, the Bank of England had to buy more. It was financial warfare, and Britain was losing. Now here's where the drama reaches its peak. September 16th, 1992, Black Wednesday. That morning, the pound was under massive selling pressure. At 10:30 a.m., Chancellor Lamont announced the Bank of England would raise interest rates from 10% to 12% immediately. This was designed to make holding pounds more attractive. It didn't work. Speculators kept selling. An hour later, at 11:45 a.m., Lamont announced a second rate hike, 12% to 15%, effective the next day. This was unprecedented. Rates were now cripplingly high, devastating for businesses and homeowners. But even 15% couldn't stop the hemorrhaging. Soros later said he knew Britain had lost when the second hike was announced. No government could sustain 15% rates. Speculators accelerated selling. The Bank of England burned through billions more buying pounds that were immediately sold. It was futile. By 7 p.m., Chancellor Lamont appeared on television looking defeated. He announced Britain was suspending ERM membership and the pound would float freely. The 2-year experiment was over. Britain had surrendered. The pound crashed 15% overnight, eventually falling 25%. George Soros, who had shorted £10 billion, made approximately $1 billion profit in a single day. His total profit reached $2 billion over following weeks. Other hedge funds made billions more. The British government lost an estimated £3.4 billion in one day. Taxpayers absorbed the loss. But here's the fascinating part. Britain's economy actually improved after exiting. With the pound devalued and interest rates lowered, the recession ended. British exports became competitive. Growth resumed. By 1993, Britain was outperforming Europe. In hindsight, Soros did Britain a favor by forcing them out of a policy strangling their economy. But the British establishment was humiliated. Headlines screamed about speculators attacking Britain. Soros was vilified as greedy, though he wasn't British and owed Britain nothing. Soros was unapologetic. He explained that governments often maintain unsustainable policies for political reasons. When they do, markets eventually force reality upon them. Speculators don't cause the crisis. They're the mechanism through which reality asserts itself. If Britain's policy was sustainable, no amount of speculation could have broken it. The fact that Soros succeeded proved the policy was wrong. So what made Soros's trade successful? First, he correctly identified a fundamental economic imbalance. Second, he had courage to bet enormous amounts on his analysis. Third, timing was perfect, striking when political pressure was maximal and reserves depleted. And fourth, he understood government psychology. Politicians defend losing positions until forced to surrender. Soros positioned himself to profit from that inevitable capitulation. But we have to ask, was it ethical? Soros made $1 billion while British taxpayers lost $3.4 billion. Defenders argue Soros simply recognized reality. If he hadn't shorted the pound, someone else would have. The earn policy was unsustainable regardless. Critics argue massive speculation destabilizes economies and harms ordinary people. The £3.4 billion could have funded schools or hospitals instead of enriching hedge funds. Even if Britain's policy was wrong, should speculators profit from government failure? The truth is complicated. Soros's trade revealed the limits of government power in global capital markets. It means unelected financiers with enough money can override democratically chosen policies. That's terrifying for democracy. But it also means governments can't deny reality forever. Markets impose discipline, even on powerful nations. The legacy of Black Wednesday proved individual speculators could challenge governments and win. In 1997, Soros was accused of triggering the Asian financial crisis. Southeast Asian leaders called him an economic criminal. Soros denied responsibility, arguing those economies had fundamental problems he recognized. By 2024, Soros's quantum fund has generated over $40 billion in profits. Soros himself is worth $7 billion, having donated $32 billion to his Open Society foundations. He's become one of the most controversial figures in global politics. But regardless of politics, one fact remains. On September 16, 1992, George Soros achieved something unprecedented. One man, with one trade, forced one of the world's most powerful governments to reverse course and cost them billions. He didn't have an army or a government. He had analysis, courage, and capital. And that was enough to break the Bank of England. The man who broke the Bank of England proved that in modern capitalism, information and conviction can overcome even nations. Britain recovered and thrived outside the ERM. Soros made billions and became a legend. And every currency trader since has studied Black Wednesday, hoping to find their own impossible bet. The lesson is brutal but clear. Governments can print money, pass laws, and command armies. But if the market decides your policy is wrong and has enough capital to bet against you, you'll lose. George Soros proved it. And the Bank of England learned it the hard way. If you made it this far, leave a British pound emoji in the comments. And please subscribe if you haven't already. Also check out my video on how one man sold the Eiffel Tower twice. Another story of audacity and brilliant execution. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.